I walked into my study and froze. My daughter was bent over my desk, carefully copying my signature onto legal papers. She didn't see me. I backed away silently, went straight to my lawyer, and recorded something. At the will reading, when she thought she'd won everything, the screen turned on and her face went white. Subscribe to the channel, leave your like and comment from which part of the world you are watching. Get comfortable and relax. Let's begin. I saw the light first, a thin yellow line under the door of my study cutting through the darkness of the hallway. It was past 11. I had come downstairs for a glass of water, my slippers silent on the polished wood. No one should have been in there. The house was still, wrapped in the quiet of a Tuesday night. I stood there, holding my empty glass, and felt a coldness that had nothing to do with the air conditioning. I did not call out. A lifetime of observation, of reading subtle cues in historical texts and in people, told me to be quiet. I moved closer, my hand pausing before it touched the doorknob. The door was not fully closed. It was open a crack, just enough. I leaned forward, my eye to the narrow gap. My daughter was at my desk, Cassie. Her back was to me, the lamplight casting a halo around her straightened hair. She was bent over my blotter, her posture one of intense concentration. I saw the familiar blue leather of my own stationery box open beside her. She was writing. The scratching of the pen was the only sound in the room. I watched her hand move across the paper, slow and deliberate. Then she stopped, set the pen down, and lifted a single sheet. She held it up to the light, examining it. I saw the letterhead. My letterhead, and I knew, with a certainty that dropped like a stone in my stomach, what document she was scrutinizing. I had only one legal document in that box, the single page will I drafted with Ben Carter after Robert died. Simple, clear, leaving everything to my only child. Cassie lowered the page. She picked up the pen again, and then she did something that stopped the breath in my lungs. From her purse, she withdrew another piece of paper. She placed it side by side with the first. She began to copy, her head tilted, her eyes flicking between the two documents. She was not reading, she was tracing. The curve of the E, the loop of the L, the final flourish of Nora Vance. She was practicing my signature. A wave of heat washed over me, followed instantly by a deep, marrow-level chill. I watched her hand, the hand I had held crossing streets, the fingers I had bandaged after playground falls, meticulously forge my name. She did it 3 times on a notepad before she turned to the second document, the new one she had just written. With a confidence that shattered me, she signed my name at the bottom. She blew on the ink, a small, practical gesture, then compared the 2 signatures with a satisfied nod. I stepped back. The floorboard did not creak. I have lived in this house for 40 years. I know which ones to avoid. I retreated down the dark hallway past the photographs of her graduations, our family vacations, my late husband's smiling face. I walked into the kitchen and set the glass in the sink. My hands were steady. I looked at them, wondering at their steadiness. Then the feeling came. It was not a surge of anger. It was a collapse, an internal silent cratering. My legs gave out and I sat heavily on a kitchen chair. The hum of the refrigerator filled the silence. I replayed the scene. The focused set of her shoulders, the careful strokes, the professional appraisal of her own crime. This was not a moment of desperate impulse. This was a planned execution. She knew where I kept the will. She had obtained matching paper. She had waited for a night I went to bed early. The pain was a physical weight on my chest. I thought of the will she was replacing. The old one left my entire estate to her, the house, the savings, the investments Robert and I had spent a lifetime building. It was not a vast fortune, but it was security. It was a legacy of our work. What could be in the new document that demanded such betrayal? To disinherit me completely? To sell the house the day after my funeral? The specifics did not matter yet. The act was everything. I sat in the dark for a long time. The initial shock began to harden into something else, a clear, cold clarity. Confronting her now would mean screams, tears, denials. It would mean a messy, emotional war in my own home, and she was better at those wars than I was. She would twist it, make me doubt what I saw, accuse me of confusion or worse. She would win. I am not a woman of drama. I am a woman of research, of evidence, of strategy. I spent my career teaching about power structures, about how the seemingly weak can outmaneuver the overtly strong through patience and intelligence. This was my home, my legacy, my life's work on that forged piece of paper. She had declared war not on a mother, but on Eleanor Vance. And Eleanor Vance does not fight battles in the kitchen in the dark. I stood up. My body felt both heavy and light. I walked to the back window and looked out at my garden, silvered by the moon. The rose bushes Robert planted were vague shapes in the gloom. I made a decision there, looking at those roses. I would not confront. I would observe. I would plan. I went back upstairs. I did not look toward the study. I heard the faint sound of a drawer closing, then the click of the lamp being turned off. I continued to my bedroom and closed the door. I did not sleep. I lay in the dark and let the betrayal settle into me, not as a wound, but as a fact, a new parameter of my world. My daughter was my adversary. The knowledge was awful, but it was solid. I could build on solid things. The next morning, I rose at my usual time. I dressed in a cream-colored linen suit. I made coffee. When Cassie came downstairs, she was bright, cheerful. "Morning, Mom. You're up early." "I slept well," I said, pouring coffee into my favorite mug. "And you were up late." A flicker, so fast it could have been a trick of the light, passed over her face. "Oh, just some online shopping. Got carried away." She smiled, a perfect glossy smile. "Can I get you anything?" "No, thank you," I said, my voice mild. I sipped my coffee. I watched her move around the kitchen, this stranger who had my daughter's face. She was nervous, her energy brittle. She was waiting for a reaction that did not come. After she left for her appointments, I went to the study. Nothing was out of place. The stationery box was in its drawer. My old will was still there, in its blue folder. I did not touch it. I looked at the chair where she had sat. I saw no trace of her crime, only the lingering scent of her perfume in the air. I picked up the phone and called Ben Carter's office. His assistant put me through. "Nora," his warm voice came down the line, "to what do I owe the pleasure?" "Ben," I said, looking out at the garden, now bright in the morning sun, "I need to schedule a meeting, a legal checkup, let's call it. Something has come up that requires your expertise." "Of course. Is everything all right?" His tone shifted to professional concern. "I'm not sure yet," I said, and that was the truth. "But I need to understand my options. Can you see me tomorrow?" We set a time. I hung up and placed the phone gently back in its cradle. The first move was made. The game, a game I never wanted to play, had begun. The grief was still there, a vast cold lake inside me. But on its surface, a new layer had formed, a sheet of calm, deliberate ice. I would walk on it. I would not look down. I had a path to forge. The scent of old paper and lemon wood polish met me as I stepped into Ben Carter's office. It was a smell of stability, of precedent. I had chosen my seat, a leather armchair facing his broad oak desk, before he even finished greeting his assistant. I needed the solidity of it at my back. Ben came in, his suit jacket buttoned, a file folder under his arm. "Nora," he said, his eyes scanning my face immediately. He was a man who noticed things. "You look composed. That worries me more than if you looked upset." "I am composed," I said. "It is a necessary condition for what I have to tell you." He sat, placing the folder on the desk. He did not open it. He waited. I had rehearsed this moment all night and through the morning. I presented the facts in the order I had arranged them, like evidence for a lecture: the late hour, the light under the door, the scene at the desk, the practicing of the signature, the final forgery on a new document. I did not use the word betrayal. I did not mention the cold weight in my stomach or the silent cratering in my kitchen. I described actions and observations. When I finished, the room was quiet. Ben removed his glasses and pinched the bridge of his nose. His expression had shifted from professional concern to something harder. "Cassandra," he said, the word flat. "You are certain. I am certain." "And the original will? It's still in your possession?" "I left it untouched. I did not look for the new document she created. I assumed she would have taken it with her or hidden it elsewhere." He leaned back, his chair creaking. "Legally, what she has done is fraud, uttering a forged instrument. It's a felony. You could call the police right now." I had considered that. The image was clear. Uniforms in my hallway, Cassie's shocked face, handcuffs, the public scandal, the irreversible tear. "That is one option," I said slowly. "It is a grenade. It destroys everything in the blast radius, including me. I would survive it. But what remains would be rubble." Ben nodded, understanding. "And a direct confrontation?" She would deny it. She would say I was confused, that my eyesight is failing, that I am becoming suspicious in my old age. It would be her word against mine. There would be no evidence, only my testimony. It would degrade into a personal argument I have no desire to have. He placed his glasses back on. "So, you want a different kind of justice." "I want a resolution that I control," I corrected. "The law is my tool, not my hammer. I witnessed a crime. I need to document that witness in a way that cannot be denied, and I need to ensure my true wishes are executed, not the forgery." Ben was silent for a full minute, staring at the spines of the law books lining his wall. I could see the strategy forming in his mind. "We need to create an unimpeachable record of your testamentary intent," he said finally, "and we need to let her play her hand." "Explain." "First, we do nothing to alert her. You behave normally. Let her believe she has succeeded. That is crucial. She must file that forged will with the probate court after you pass, thinking it is the only one." He leaned forward, his elbows on the desk. "Second, you and I create a new, updated last will and testament. Today, we videotape you signing it, with me and 2 independent witnesses present. We make a clear recording of you affirming it as your true intent." "A video," I repeated. "More than that," he said. "A video affidavit. You state, on camera, the facts you just told me, that you are of sound mind, that you are making this will freely, and that you are doing so specifically because you witnessed Cassandra forging a prior document. You detail the event, the date, the time. We make it a sealed part of the filing. It only comes to light if a contested will is presented." I let the structure of it settle in my mind. It was elegant. It was cold. It allowed her to march confidently into a trap of her own making. "When she files the forgery, the court will be notified of the existence of a later video-backed will. Her document will be invalidated. The fraud will be exposed in a legal setting, in front of her own lawyer. There will be no shouting match in your living room. There will be a procedural, factual annihilation." The rightness of it clicked into place. This was not emotion. This was process. "And the new will's provisions?" I asked. "That is up to you, Nora. The old one left everything to her. What is your true wish now?" I looked out his window at the city. My life was not just assets. It was a collection of meaning. The house, my books, the retirement fund, the modest investment portfolio. I thought of the community garden project I volunteered with, the young women's scholarship fund at my alma mater I quietly supported. I thought of the heirlooms, my mother's pearl necklace, Robert's watch. I thought of the pen set on my desk, a gift from Cassie for my 55th birthday. "I want to leave her something," I heard myself say. The words surprised me. Ben's eyebrow lifted. "I want to leave her the item she used to betray me, the pen from my desk. She will understand the message. Everything else, the house, the liquid assets, will be divided between the garden and the scholarship fund. The personal items, the photographs, the small things, I will designate for specific friends and family. She receives the pen, only the pen. Ben wrote this down. A token disinheritance, symbolic, and legally sound provided the video explains the reason for the change. It shows deliberation, not caprice. He looked at me. This is a severe course, Nora. It will end your relationship with your daughter. She ended it when she forged my name, I said, my voice even. I am merely formalizing the conclusion. I will not reward a felony with my life's work. He gave a slow, definitive nod. All right, then we begin. Today we draft the new will. I will arrange for 2 paralegals from another firm to act as witnesses, to avoid any appearance of coercion. We will film here in my conference room. I will handle all the filings. Your role is to continue as you are. Be the mother she expects. It will be the performance of your life. I am prepared, I said, and I was. The cold lake within me had found an outlet, a channel. The energy of grief was being redirected, transformed into the meticulous steps of a plan. I felt a terrible clarity. Ben stood and walked to a small sideboard. He poured 2 cups of tea from a porcelain pot, the scent of peppermint filling the space between us. He handed one to me. Our eyes met over the rims of the cups. To justice, he said quietly, not as a toast, but as a statement of fact. To clarity, I replied. I took a sip. The tea was hot and sharp. It tasted like resolve. The performance began the moment I walked back into my house. The scent of my own kitchen, of lemon cleaner and dried herbs, was familiar, but it felt like a set. I was an actor returning to a stage after learning the script had been rewritten against me. I hung my coat in the closet with deliberate care. Cassie was in the living room, scrolling through her phone. She looked up, her face arranging itself into a smile. There you are. I was starting to wonder. You were out for a while. I had an appointment, I said, moving to the sink to wash my hands. The water was cool. A checkup with Ben Carter, legal housekeeping. I kept my back to her, watching her reflection in the window over the sink. Her posture stiffened just slightly. Oh, everything okay? Her voice was light, but there was a new attention in it. Everything is in order, I said, turning and drying my hands on a towel. It's just prudent to review things periodically at my age. He sends his regards. I offered a small, bland smile. Would you like some tea? I was about to make a pot. The offer seemed to disarm her. Concern was a role she could play. Let me do it, Mom. You sit down. She stood too quickly and busied herself with the kettle and canisters. I let her. I took my usual chair at the kitchen table and watched her movements. They were efficient, but there was a nervous energy to them, a desire to please that felt foreign. This was part of her new act, I realized, the attentive daughter securing her investment. So, what did you and Ben talk about, if you don't mind me asking? She inquired, her back still to me. Wills, powers of attorney, the usual dull topics, I said, my voice even, making sure all the I's are dotted. It's not a conversation for a sunny afternoon. I saw her shoulders relax a fraction. She interpreted my nonchalance as ignorance. Well, I'm glad it's done. One less thing for you to worry about. She brought the teapot and 2 cups to the table. Her smile was wider now, more genuine in its relief. The forgery sat between us, an invisible, ticking object. That evening, she insisted on making dinner. You cooked last night. My turn. She moved around the kitchen with a proprietary air, using pans and spices without asking where things were. I sat at the table, ostensibly reading a journal, but I was observing. Her confidence had grown. She hummed. She asked me trivial questions about my book club, about the garden. Her questions were not for conversation. They were probes, checking my emotional temperature, ensuring no suspicion had taken root. We ate in the dining room, a space we used for holidays and apparently for performances. The crystal gleamed under the chandelier. She had lit candles. The scene was one of domestic warmth, but every gesture felt amplified, studied. "The house feels so peaceful lately," she remarked, cutting into her chicken. "It's nice, just the two of us. It must get lonely for you sometimes, though." "I have my routines," I said. "They keep me occupied." "But all this space," she continued, sweeping her hand slightly to indicate the room, the house beyond. "It's a lot for one person to manage, the upkeep, the taxes. Have you ever thought about, downsizing? There are beautiful modern condos with no maintenance worries." There it was, the first exploratory nudge towards the asset. I took a sip of water. "This house holds my memories. Your father chose the paint for this room. You learned to walk on that floor. A condo has no history. I am not ready for a space without history." A flicker of impatience crossed her face, quickly smoothed away. "Of course. I just worry about you is all." "Your concern is noted," I said, and let the subject drop. The rest of the meal passed with talk of her work, of mutual acquaintances, a stream of insignificant chatter that required little from me. I nodded. I made small sounds of acknowledgement. I played my part. The slightly tired, contented mother, oblivious to the plot unfolding around her. Later, in the sanctity of my bedroom with the door locked, I began my real work. I opened the small, fireproof box I kept on the top shelf of my closet. Inside were documents: the deed, insurance papers, investment statements. I did not remove them. I opened a fresh, blank notebook. On the first page, I wrote, "Inventory." I started a list, not of monetary values, Ben would handle that, but of substance. I listed the tangible pieces of my life: wedding china, service for 12, sterling silver flatware, Georgian pattern, Robert's collection of first edition Baldwin novels, my mother's quilts, stored in the cedar chest. I wrote down the names of my jewelry pieces, the artists of the paintings on the walls, the provenance of the African sculptures we had collected on our travels. This was not sentimentality, it was a tactical assessment. I needed to know what I was protecting, item by item. I needed to decide, with cold clarity, where each piece would go when Cassie was no longer the heir. The community garden could use the proceeds from the silver. The scholarship fund would benefit from the sale of the investments. My friend Miriam had always admired the jade necklace. I wrote her name beside it. As I wrote, I could hear Cassie moving around downstairs, the distant sound of the television. She was relaxed, believing her secret was safe, believing her mother was a fool wrapped in nostalgia. The distance between us, always present in recent years, had now solidified into a permanent, formal divide. We were no longer family. We were opposing parties in a quiet, undeclared war. I closed the notebook and secured it back in the box. The performance would continue tomorrow and the next day for as long as necessary. My lines were silence, acquiescence, and a benign smile. Hers were avarice, condescension, and false care. We would play our scenes until the stage was finally set for the last act. My hand was steady as I turned off the lamp. The anger was there, a deep, cold sediment, but it was immobile. It had been replaced by something more useful, a patient, focused determination. I slept. The door to the side room in Ben's office was heavier than it looked. It closed behind me with a solid, muffled thud, sealing out the sounds of the main firm. The space was small, windowless, and deliberately neutral. A camera on a tripod was aimed at a simple chair positioned against a plain gray backdrop. A small wired microphone was clipped to a stand beside it. On a table to the side, a laptop screen glowed, showing a live feed of the empty chair. It was a functional, sterile space, designed for depositions and recorded statements. Today, it would serve as my confessional and my armory. Ben was adjusting the camera's focus. A young woman I didn't know, introduced as a paralegal from a neighboring firm, stood quietly by the laptop. She was the first independent witness. "Are you ready, Nora?" Ben asked, his voice low and professional. "I am." I walked to the chair and sat. The material was cool through my linen trousers. Ben handed me the freshly printed will, 10 pages bound with a blue backing. "This is the document you will be signing. We will film the entire signing. Then I will ask you a series of questions to establish your competency and intent. After that, you may make your voluntary statement regarding the circumstances that prompted this new will." I took the document. The words swam for a moment before settling into legible lines. It was dense with legal language, but the operative clauses were clear. I knew what it said. "I understand." The paralegal stepped forward. "Mrs. Vance, my name is Alicia Marsh. I am here solely to witness your signature and the proceedings. I have no prior relationship with you or Mr. Carter's firm beyond this professional capacity." She stated this clearly for the record. I nodded to her. Ben positioned himself just outside the camera's frame. "We are beginning recording now." He gave a signal. A small red light glowed on the camera. "State your full name and the date for the record, please." I looked into the dark lens. "My name is Eleanor Marie Vance. Today is October 17th. My voice sounded calmer than I felt. The core of cold resolve was there, but around it a fine tremor had begun, a vibration of finality. For the next 20 minutes, Ben guided me through the formalities. Did I understand this was my last will and testament? I did. Had I read it? I had. Was I under any coercion or undue influence? I was not. Did I revoke all prior wills and codicils? I did. My answers were clear, monosyllabic. I signed each page where Alicia Marsh had placed small, bright yellow stickers. The scratch of the pen was loud in the quiet room. She and Ben countersigned as witnesses. The physical act was complete. Then Ben said, "Mrs. Vance, you have indicated you wish to make a supplemental statement regarding your testamentary intentions. Please proceed." This was the moment. The camera's eye was unblinking. I folded my hands in my lap. I did not look at Ben or the paralegal. I looked directly into the lens, imagining it was a conduit to a future room, to a future version of my daughter. "I am making this new will today because my previous testamentary plan has been compromised," I began, the words finding a steady rhythm. On the evening of October 15th, at approximately 11:20 p.m., I entered my home after going downstairs for a glass of water. I observed a light under the door of my private study. I approached and saw my daughter, Cassandra Vance Davis, seated at my desk. I described it. The lamplight, the stationery box, the 2 documents side by side. I did not embellish. I did not describe my feelings. I presented it as an observed incident. I watched her practice my signature on a separate notepad. I then watched her sign the name Nora Vance on a new, presumably testamentary document. She then compared the 2 signatures. I believe she was forging my last will and testament. I paused. The air in the room was still. I retreated without her knowledge. I did not confront her. I have not confronted her. I engaged legal counsel the following morning. "This will you have just witnessed me sign reflects my true and final wishes. My prior will, which left my entire estate to Cassandra, is revoked not out of malice, but out of necessity. I cannot allow a document created through fraud to dictate the disposition of my life's work." I had rehearsed the next part. It was the hardest. To Cassandra Vance Davis, I leave the following: the gold-plated fountain pen, set that resides on the desk in my study. It was a gift from her to me on my 55th birthday. It is the instrument I believe she used to commit the forgery. She will understand its significance. All the rest of my estate, real and personal, I leave to the Greenhaven Community Garden Project and the Robert and Eleanor Vance Memorial Scholarship Fund at Spelman College, to be divided equally. I took a slow breath. The legal part was over. Now, for the record, I allowed one layer of the emotion to surface, not as heat, but as a stated fact. Cassandra, if you are seeing this, you have already presented a forged document to a court. You have forced this moment. I loved you. I trusted you. You chose to break that trust for material gain. This is the consequence. You are my daughter, and I will mourn that relationship for the rest of my life. But you are not my heir. You are the reason I had to make this recording. I stopped. I had nothing else to say. The statement is concluded, Ben said formally from the side. He looked at the paralegal. Do you have any questions for Mrs. Vance regarding her voluntariness or mental state? No, sir, the young woman said. It is clear. Ben walked over and pressed a button on the camera. The red light went out. The silence that followed was different, emptier, charged with what had just been committed to memory. Alicia Marsh gathered her things, offered me a sympathetic but professional nod, and left the room. Ben ejected a small memory card from the camera. He held it up. This is it, Nora. The sealed weapon. It will be filed with the will in a secure affidavit. No one sees it unless the forged will is presented. Then it becomes public record. He placed it into a small envelope and sealed it. I stood up. My legs felt stiff. The performance of absolute calm was over, and a profound fatigue washed in behind it. I had just legally and publicly disowned my child. I had crystallized the betrayal into a permanent record. There was no going back. Did it feel like justice? Ben asked quietly, not looking at me as he labeled the envelope. It felt like surgery, I said. A necessary, painful removal. I picked up my purse. The weight of the afternoon was immense. Now we wait. Now we wait, he agreed. She will make the next move. It's the only move she has. I walked out of the sterile room, back into the familiar wood-paneled warmth of Ben's main office. The transition was jarring. The world outside was continuing, unaware that I had just forever altered the future of my family. I had converted my pain into evidence. The transaction was complete. All that remained was for the bill to come due. The legal machinery began to turn, silently and without my daily involvement. That was its purpose. After the video was recorded, my role shifted from active strategist to patient observer. Ben had the baton. My life, for appearances, resumed its normal rhythm. 3 days after the recording, Ben called. His voice was matter-of-fact. The package has been filed with the probate court. The will, the video affidavit, everything. It's in the system now, under seal. It exists as a fact. I was in my garden pruning dead rose heads. The phone was tucked between my shoulder and ear. What does that mean exactly? It means if anyone, specifically Cassandra, files a different will claiming to be your last testament, the court clerk will be notified of this newer video-backed filing. A hearing will be scheduled to determine validity. Our documents are time-stamped, witnessed, and accompanied by your sworn statement. They form a paper wall. I heard the shuffling of pages. I've also formally registered with the county as your attorney of record, so any probate activity concerning Eleanor Vance will come to me. A paper wall, I repeated, looking at the thorn in my gloved hand. It was sharp, designed for protection. And we just wait for her to run into it. Precisely. The ball is in her court. She has the forged document. She will need to file it upon your passing to make any claim. That is the moment the mechanism engages. The simplicity of it was chilling. I had set a trap that could only be sprung after my death. My justice would be posthumous. For a moment, the morbidity of it threatened to overwhelm me, the idea of my own end being a procedural trigger. But then I remembered the look of concentration on her face as she mimicked my signature. The trigger had already been pulled. I was just ensuring the bullet reached its target. Thank you, Ben. Stay the course, Nora. Normalcy is your shield right now. Normalcy. I returned to my pruning. I went to the grocery store. I attended my book club where we discussed a historical novel about civil rights. I listened to my friends talk about their grandchildren and their vacation plans. I nodded and smiled. My secret was a lead weight in my chest, but it made my smiles slower, my nods more deliberate. No one seemed to notice. A week later, Cassie came over for dinner again. She brought a bottle of expensive wine. "A celebration," she said, her eyes bright. "Oh, what are we celebrating?" I asked, taking the bottle. It was a Cabernet from a vineyard Robert and I had visited. The choice felt like a violation. Just life. Us. I got a big account at work today. She waved a hand, brushing it off, but her energy was electric, triumphant. She was celebrating something else, I was sure. Perhaps she had checked my study, found the old will still there, and assumed her new one was undetected and secure. Perhaps she was already mentally spending the money. "Congratulations," I said, and poured 2 glasses. We clinked. "To your success." "To the future," she replied, her gaze drifting past me, around the living room, assessing. The performance continued. I asked about her work. She gave vague, enthusiastic answers. She asked if I had thought any more about simplifying. I said I was content with my current level of complexity. The subtext hummed beneath every word. The following Monday, Ben called again. His tone was different. "She's made her move." I was organizing my spice cabinet. I closed the door and leaned against the counter. "Tell me." A probate attorney named Martin Armitage filed a document today, a notice of foreign will. He's representing Cassandra Vance Davis. He submitted a document purporting to be the last will and testament of Eleanor Vance, dated October 15th. The date, the night of the forgery. She hadn't even bothered to backdate it to avoid suspicion. Her arrogance was stunning. And the court clerk followed procedure. She saw the conflict with our later filing and alerted Judge Harper's office. A hearing is now scheduled for 2 weeks from today to examine the validity of both documents and determine which, if any, should be admitted to probate. "A hearing," I said. The word made it real. A room, a judge, a confrontation. Yes, not a trial, but a formal proceeding. Both parties, you through me and Cassandra through Armitage, will present arguments. We will present our will and the video. They will present theirs. The judge will decide. "Cassie doesn't know I'm alive in this process," I stated. "She thinks she's filing after a death. This will be a shock." "It will be the first shock," Ben confirmed. "She will receive a formal notice of the hearing, naming you as the living petitioner contesting her submitted will. It will state that a later, valid will exists. It will not say anything about the video. That is our surprise for the hearing itself." I absorbed this. The legal web was now visible. Filaments had been spun, and the fly had touched them. The vibration was traveling up the line. What do I need to do? "You need to be served with the notice as well. It's a formality. More importantly, you need to prepare yourself to attend that hearing. You will see her there. She will see you. There will be no avoiding it." I looked around my kitchen, at the well-worn counters, the sunlight on the floor. This peaceful space was the eye of the storm. Outside, the winds were now legally sanctioned, documented, and scheduled. I will be ready. After hanging up, I finished organizing the spices. I wiped the counters. I performed the small ordering tasks of my life. The waiting was over. The path was now marked on a calendar. The paper walls were erected. All that remained was to walk into the room and watch her realize she was already trapped. The law was no longer an abstract tool. It was a corridor with a door at the end, and I had the key. I simply had to turn it in front of her. The formal notice arrived in a stiff, legal-sized envelope with the court's return address embossed in the corner. It was mixed in with the usual mail, a gardening catalog, a utility bill. I brought the stack inside and placed it on the hall table. I made a pot of tea first. I sat at the kitchen table and sorted through the envelopes, saving the court notice for last. When I finally opened it using my silver letter opener, the language was dense and procedural. In the matter of the estate of Eleanor Vance, petition for probate, hearing scheduled. My eyes found the date, time, and location. Room 412 of the county courthouse. It was real. It was an appointment. I read it through twice, then placed it back in the envelope. There was no shock. It was the expected next step, now materialized on heavy paper. Ben had called an hour earlier to tell me it was coming. It's just a formality for you, Nora, but for her, it will be the first indication that her plan has gone off the rails. Watch for her reaction. I did not have to watch for long. My phone rang later that afternoon. Cassie's name flashed on the screen. I let it ring 3 times, steadying my breath before answering. "Hello, dear." "Mom." Her voice was breathless, a forced calm over obvious agitation. "Did you get something in the mail today from the court?" "I did," I said, my tone even. "A notice about a hearing, something about my estate. It seems there's some confusion." "Confusion is right," she said, and I could hear the wheels turning. She was trying to gauge my knowledge. "It's probably just a clerical error, some mix-up with paperwork, but it says you filed a will?" "A new one." "I reviewed my affairs with Ben recently, yes, as I told you. Standard practice." I took a slow sip of tea. "This notice says someone else filed a will on my behalf, dated October 15th. That's odd, don't you think? I was with you that evening." A beat of silence. I could almost hear her pulse racing through the phone. "Very odd. Maybe it's a fake. Someone trying to cause trouble." She was scrambling, testing narratives. "Perhaps," I agreed. "The court will sort it out. I suppose we'll have to attend this hearing, together, to clear it up." "Yes," she said quickly, too quickly. "Of course. Don't worry about a thing, Mom. I'll handle it. I've already contacted a lawyer, a very good one. He says these things happen sometimes. We'll get it straightened out." Her confidence was returning, bolstered by her belief that her forged document was the only one in play. She interpreted my calm as ignorance, my questions as confusion. She thought she could still manage me. "I'm sure you will," I said. "Thank you for looking into it." After she hung up, I imagined her in her sleek, minimalist condo. She would be pacing, then stopping, a slow smile spreading across her face. She would tell herself the hearing was just a hurdle, a necessary step to legitimize her claim. She would believe her lawyer could outmaneuver an old woman and her elderly attorney. The arrogance was her fatal flaw. 2 days later, she came by the house, a picture of supportive concern. She was dressed in a new, sharply tailored suit. "For the hearing," she explained, smoothing the lapel. "We need to look serious, respectable. I want the judge to see a united front." "I have appropriate clothing," I said, looking at her. The suit was expensive. It spoke of anticipated victory. "I know you do, Mom, but I was thinking maybe something a little more modern, to show you're of sound mind, sharp." The insult was velvet-coated. "My mind is sound enough to know my own preferences," I replied, a slight edge in my voice I let her hear. Let her think it was the irritation of an older woman, not the cold glare of discovery. She backtracked, flashing a placating smile. "Of course. Forget I said anything." She glanced around the living room, her gaze lingering on the antique mirror, the original artwork. "It's just important, that's all. This hearing will settle everything. Permanently." "I expect it will," I said. The night before the hearing, I laid out my own outfit on the bed. A simple, well-cut dress in a deep navy blue, a single strand of pearls, a matching blazer. It was the outfit I wore for important lectures and Robert's funeral. It conveyed dignity, tradition, and unassailable respectability. It was my armor. Ben called for a final briefing. All the documents are submitted. The video file is queued and ready on a separate drive for the judge. The procedure is straightforward. Armitage will present Cassie's will first. I will object based on the existence of a later, valid will. The judge will review both. When the question of authenticity arises, I will request to play the affidavit. That's the moment. I understand. Nora, he said, his voice softening, this will be difficult. You will see her face. I have already seen her face, I said. This time she will see mine. I slept poorly, not from anxiety, but from a focused anticipation. The day had arrived. The certified mail had been delivered, the calls made, the outfits chosen. All the pieces were in position on the board. The next move was no longer ours. It belonged to the law and to the truth we had recorded. As I lay in the dark, I felt no rage, only a clear, cold readiness. The performance was nearly over. The reckoning was scheduled for 10 a.m. The air in the law firm's conference room was cold enough to feel manufactured. It smelled of lemon disinfectant and faintly of dust from the air vents. Ben's firm had booked the space for the pre-hearing gathering, a neutral territory. I arrived exactly on time. Ben was already there, standing near the head of the long, polished table, a folder in his hands. He gave me a small, firm nod. I took a seat on the right side, placing my purse on the floor beside me. I folded my hands on the table and waited. The door opened. Cassie entered first, a vision in her charcoal suit, her hair perfectly smoothed. Her eyes found me immediately, and she offered a tight, reassuring smile. She was followed by a man I assumed was Martin Armitage. He was in his 50s, with a carefully maintained tan and a watch that glinted under the fluorescent lights. He carried a slim briefcase. They took seats on the opposite side of the table, a deliberate expanse of mahogany between us. "Mother," Cassie said, her voice pitched to convey calm control, "this is my attorney, Martin Armitage. Mr. Armitage, my mother, Eleanor Vance." "Mrs. Vance," Armitage said, with a professional smile that didn't reach his eyes. "A pleasure, though I wish it were under better circumstances. We're just here to clear up a simple misunderstanding, I'm sure." "I am sure the truth will clarify itself," I replied. I did not smile. Before he could respond, the door opened again. A woman in her 60s, wearing a simple floral dress and a cardigan, entered hesitantly. It was Miriam Perkins, the volunteer coordinator for the Greenhaven Community Garden. Behind her was a younger man in a slightly rumpled suit, introducing himself as David Davies from the Spelman College Alumni Office. They were the representatives for the two primary beneficiaries of my real will. Ben had notified them of the hearing as interested parties. Cassie's head swiveled toward them, her brows drawing together in confusion. "Who are you?" she asked, her voice losing some of its polished filter. Miriam gave a nervous smile. "Miriam Perkins. We're with the Garden Project." David Davies simply nodded, taking a seat at the far end of the table, clearly uncomfortable. Cassie turned to Armitage, a silent question in her eyes. He leaned over and murmured something too low for me to hear. I saw her lips press into a thin line. She had not anticipated other parties. Her gaze flicked back to me, sharper now, seeking an explanation I did not offer. The next few minutes passed in a stiff silence, broken only by the rustle of papers. Armitage conferred with Cassie in hushed tones. Ben reviewed his notes. Miriam Perkins fidgeted with her cardigan buttons. David Davies checked his phone. Cassie finally broke the quiet, addressing me across the void. "It's good of you to come, Mom. I know these legal things can be confusing, but Mr. Armitage is excellent. He'll handle everything." It was a performance for the room, an assertion of her role as the capable one, the protector. "I have every confidence in Mr. Carter," I said, indicating Ben. "He has handled my affairs for decades. He is familiar with my intentions." "Of course," Cassie said, the words smooth. "But sometimes, with older documents, things can get muddled. Memories fade. Newer understandings take precedence." She was laying the groundwork, suggesting my updated will was a product of confusion, that her forged document represented my true, earlier intent. "My memory is adequate," I said, holding her gaze. "My understanding is quite clear." A faint flush crept up her neck. She looked away toward the large clock on the wall. The minute hand jerked forward with an audible click. Miriam Perkins, seeking to fill the uncomfortable silence, spoke up. "Your garden is always so beautiful, Eleanor. The roses this year were stunning." "Thank you, Miriam," I said. "The new compost system you recommended made a significant difference." Cassie watched this exchange, her expression unreadable. The mention of the garden, a beneficiary she now realized was involved, was clearly chafing against her sense of entitlement. This was no longer a private family matter. There were witnesses. Ben checked his watch. "The judge's clerk should be calling us in shortly. Does anyone require water before we proceed?" No one answered. The room was a held breath. I studied my daughter. She was composed, but I saw the signs. The too straight posture, the slight tremor in her hand as she adjusted a cufflink, the rapid blinking. She was nervous, but she was still confident. She believed the document in Armitage's briefcase was the trump card. She believed I was a passive old woman, bewildered by a legal process she had orchestrated. Ben's phone buzzed. He looked at the screen. "That's the cue. We'll proceed to the hearing room now. Follow me, please." He held the door open. Miriam and David filed out first, followed by Armitage. Cassie stood straightening her jacket. She paused, waiting for me to rise. It was a gesture, an attempt to frame us as a unit walking in together. I stood, collected my purse, and walked toward the door. I did not offer my arm. I did not look at her. I walked past her and followed Ben into the corridor. I heard her heels click sharply on the tile behind me, a staccato rhythm of suppressed irritation and unwavering belief in her imminent victory. We were no longer mother and daughter in a waiting room. We were petitioner and respondent walking into a courtroom. The performance was over. The judgment was next. The hearing room was smaller than I expected, more functional than imposing. A raised bench for the judge, 2 tables for the parties, a few rows of benches for observers. The walls were a pale institutional green. Judge Harper was a woman in her late 50s, with close-cropped gray hair and glasses perched on the end of her nose. She did not look up as we entered and took our places. Ben and I sat at one table. Cassie and Armitage sat at the other. Miriam and David took seats in the first row behind us. The clerk called the case. "In the matter of the estate of Eleanor Vance, a living person," the judge stated, her voice dry and efficient. "Petition for probate of a document dated October 15th. I understand there is a competing later document. Counsel, identify yourselves for the record." Ben and Armitage gave their names and whom they represented. The judge made a note. "Mr. Armitage, you are submitting the earlier document. Proceed." Armitage stood. He was polished, confident. "Thank you, Your Honor. My client, Cassandra Vance Davis, is the daughter and sole heir of Mrs. Vance. She has in her possession her mother's last will and testament, duly executed and witnessed." He opened his briefcase and withdrew a single sheet of paper. I recognized the blue stationery from across the room. He handed it to the clerk, who passed it up to the judge. "This document, dated October 15th of this year, leaves Mrs. Vance's entire estate, without reservation, to her daughter, Cassandra. It is simple, clear, and reflects Mrs. Vance's long-standing intent to provide for her only child." Judge Harper scanned the paper. Her expression gave nothing away. "I see only one signature line, the testator's. Where are the witness signatures?" "It is a holographic will, Your Honor," Armitage said smoothly, "entirely in the testator's handwriting, including the signature. It is valid under state statute. My client discovered it among her mother's personal papers after Mrs. Vance expressed concerns about her own estate planning. We believe it represents her most recent and definitive wish." I felt, rather than saw, Cassie's gaze on me. I kept my eyes forward, on the judge. Judge Harper looked over her glasses at Ben. "Mr. Carter, you represent Mrs. Vance, who is, I note, very much alive, and you have filed a subsequent instrument." Ben rose. "Yes, Your Honor. My client executed a formal will in my office on October 17th, with 2 disinterested witnesses and myself present. That will was filed concurrently with a sealed affidavit. The document Mr. Armitage presents is not valid. My client has testified that it is a forgery. A ripple went through the room. I saw Cassie stiffen. Armitage maintained his composure. A serious allegation, Your Honor. My client is shocked and saddened by this. We believe Mrs. Vance is confused, or perhaps being influenced. The document we present is in her own hand. We are prepared to provide a handwriting expert if necessary. The judge looked at me. Mrs. Vance, you are present. You understand the allegation being made by your own attorney? I stood. My voice was clear in the quiet room. I do, Your Honor. The document Mr. Armitage holds was not written by me. I witnessed my daughter creating it and forging my signature on the night of October 15th. Cassie made a small, choked sound. "Mother, please," she whispered loud enough to be heard. Her face was a mask of pained disbelief. It was a masterful performance. The judge held up a hand. "Mr. Armitage, you allege this is a holographic will. Mrs. Vance alleges it is a forgery. Mr. Carter, you have a later, properly witnessed will. The procedure here is to determine which document controls." She looked back at the paper in her hand. On its face, the October 15th document meets the basic requirements for a holographic will. The burden to prove forgery is high. Mr. Carter, do you have evidence beyond your client's testimony? "We do, Your Honor," Ben said. "It is contained in the sealed affidavit filed with the court. We request permission to present it now." Armitage stood again. "Objection, Your Honor. This is highly irregular. If Mrs. Vance has concerns, they should have been raised privately. This public spectacle is damaging to my client. The will we submit is valid. The later document, executed under potentially coercive circumstances, should be set aside." The judge considered this. She looked at the two documents before her, the single handwritten sheet and the thick, professionally bound will Ben had submitted. "The court's duty is to ascertain the true intent of the testator," she said slowly. "Mr. Armitage, your document is earlier in time. It is handwritten, which lends it a certain presumption of authenticity for a holographic instrument. In the absence of clear, convincing evidence of forgery at this preliminary stage, I am inclined to admit it to probate. Mr. Carter, your later will presents a fact question. A full evidentiary hearing on the issue of forgery and undue influence would be required to invalidate the earlier document." She paused, adjusting her glasses. "Given that Mrs. Vance is living, the probate of the earlier will is, of course, contingent upon her death. However, for purposes of today's ruling on which instrument is to be held as the operative one, I find the October 15th document has prima facie validity. The October 17th will is suspended pending further proceedings." It was a procedural ruling, cold and logical. Without seeing the video, the judge had to follow the law. The forged will looked valid. Cassie had won the first round. I sat down. My hands were steady. Ben placed a calming hand briefly on my arm. He had warned me this might happen. Cassie's face transformed. The pained concern melted away, replaced by a profound, glowing relief that she struggled to contain. She leaned over and whispered something to Armitage, who gave a satisfied nod. He turned to the judge. "Thank you, Your Honor, for your wise ruling." Judge Harper nodded. "This matter is not fully concluded, counsel. But for now, the October 15th document is recognized. We are adjourned." She tapped her gavel lightly. The sound broke the formal silence. Miriam Perkins looked at me, her eyes wide with confusion and sympathy. David Davies simply shook his head, gathering his things. Cassie stood. She smoothed her suit jacket. She turned toward me, her expression now one of gentle, pitying triumph. "Oh, Mom," she said, her voice soft but carrying. "I'm so sorry it came to this. All these accusations. It must be so confusing for you. But don't worry, I'll take care of everything, just like I always have." Armitage was packing his briefcase. a slight smile on his face. It was done. In the eyes of the court, at this moment, she had won. She had the validated will. She believed the battle was over. She walked out of the hearing room, her lawyer beside her, her heels clicking a victorious rhythm on the linoleum floor. The false dawn was blinding. Ben did not move to gather his papers. He remained standing at our table. Miriam Perkins had half risen from her seat, her face etched with disappointment. David Davies sighed, closing his briefcase with a soft click. The judge was making a final note on her docket. "Your Honor," Ben said, his voice cutting through the dispirited rustle. "Before the court adjourns, I must formally move for reconsideration based on the sealed affidavit filed concurrently with the October 17th will. The affidavit contains clear and convincing evidence of fraud that directly addresses the court's concern about the burden of proof." Judge Harper looked up, a hint of impatience in her eyes. "Mr. Carter, I have just ruled. You heard my findings. With respect, Your Honor, you ruled without reviewing all the evidence. The affidavit was filed under seal to preserve its integrity. It is a sworn video statement from Mrs. Vance, recorded on October 17th, detailing the events of the forgery. It provides the evidence the court requires. I move to have it entered into the record and viewed now." Armitage, who was nearly at the door with Cassie, turned sharply. "Your Honor, this is outrageous. A rehearsed, self-serving video created under the guidance of counsel is not evidence. It is theater." "It is a sworn affidavit," Ben countered, his tone unyielding. "It goes directly to the testator's state of mind and the authenticity of the opposing instrument. The court has a duty to consider it before making a final determination on probate." The judge leaned back in her chair, her gaze shifting between Ben's earnest face and Armitage's flushed one. Cassie had frozen in the doorway, her back to the room. I could see the tension in her shoulders. "A video affidavit?" Judge Harper said, curiosity now overriding irritation. "Very well. Given the gravity of the allegation, I will review it. But briefly, counsel. Clerk, please ensure the room is secure." The clerk closed the door. Cassie had no choice but to return to her seat. She did so slowly, her movements stiff. She did not look at me. Armitage resumed his place, his confidence visibly fraying. Ben handed a small digital drive to the clerk, who plugged it into a laptop connected to a flat-screen monitor on the wall. The screen flickered to life, displaying a file folder. "This is the sealed affidavit of Eleanor Vance, recorded in my offices on October 17th, with 2 independent witnesses present," Ben stated for the record. The clerk double-clicked the file. My face filled the screen. I saw myself, seated in that plain chair against the gray backdrop. I looked pale but composed, my hands folded in my lap. My recorded voice began, clear and steady in the silent room. "My name is Eleanor Marie Vance. Today is October 17th. I am making this new will today because my previous testamentary plan has been compromised." I watched the faces around the table. Miriam Perkins leaned forward, her hand over her mouth. David Davies stared, transfixed. Judge Harper removed her glasses, her eyes fixed on the screen. On the recording, I described it all. The light under the door, seeing Cassie at the desk, the 2 documents, the practice signatures, the final forgery. I stated the date and time. I stated it without embellishment, as a factual report. Cassie made a small, involuntary sound, like a gasp choked back. Her face, reflected in the polished table, had gone ashen. She was staring at her own hands, clenched in her lap. The video continued. I watched her practice my signature on a separate notepad. I then watched her sign the name Nora Vance on a new, presumably testamentary document. I believe she was forging my last will and testament. Armitage put a hand to his forehead. He was no longer looking at the screen. Then came my statement of intent. To Cassandra Vance Davis, I leave the following: the gold-plated fountain pen, set that resides on the desk in my study. It was a gift from her to me on my 55th birthday. It is the instrument I believe she used to commit the forgery. She will understand its significance." A stifled sob escaped Cassie. Her shoulders hunched. The triumph of 2 minutes ago was gone, replaced by a physical collapse in on herself. The final words played. "You are my daughter, and I will mourn that relationship for the rest of my life. But you are not my heir. You are the reason I had to make this recording." The screen went black. The silence in the room was absolute and heavy. It was the silence of a vacuum, of all previous assumptions being sucked away. Judge Harper was the first to move. She slowly put her glasses back on. She looked at the single sheet of blue stationery on her desk, then at the now blank screen. She looked at Cassie, who was shaking, her face buried in her hands. She looked at Armitage, who could not meet her gaze. "Mr. Armitage," the judge said, her voice devoid of all previous procedural warmth, "having reviewed this evidence, do you wish to withdraw the October 15th document from probate?" Armitage cleared his throat, a defeated sound. Given this new information, Your Honor, I would advise my client to withdraw the document for further review." "It is not a matter of review," the judge stated coldly. "It is a matter of fraud. The affidavit is credible, specific, and corroborated by the existence of the later will. The October 15th document is a forgery. It is null and void. I revoke my prior ruling and strike it from the record." She picked up the blue paper and held it as if it were soiled. "The court recognizes the October 17th will as the sole valid last will and testament of Eleanor Vance. Probate may proceed on that instrument upon her passing." She looked at Cassie, her expression stern. "As for the allegations of criminal conduct contained in the affidavit, that is a matter for a different branch of this court. Do you understand, Miss Vance Davis?" Cassie could not speak. She nodded, a barely perceptible jerk of her head, tears streaming silently down her face. They were not tears of remorse, I saw, but of shock, of a world obliterated. The judge turned to Ben. "Your motion is granted. This hearing is concluded." She brought the gavel down. The sound was final. It was over. The reckoning was complete. The video had done its work. I felt no surge of victory, only a vast, hollow quiet. The truth was now a matter of record. The revenge was exact, measured, and now irrevocably public. I stood. I did not look at my daughter. I picked up my purse and turned toward the door. The sound of the judge's gavel seemed to hang in the air for a moment before dissolving into the shuffling of papers and the scrape of chairs. Ben placed a steadying hand under my elbow as I stood. My legs felt functional, but the solidity of his arm was a welcome anchor. Across the table, Cassie remained seated, her face blank, staring at the empty surface. Martin Armitage was speaking to her in a low, urgent voice, but she gave no indication she heard him. Her victory had been a soap bubble, and it had popped, leaving only a damp, ugly residue. Miriam Perkins approached me, her eyes wide. "Eleanor, I don't know what to say. It was necessary," I finished for her, my voice quiet. "I am sorry you had to witness it." "We're just grateful you thought of the garden," she said, squeezing my hand briefly before turning away, clearly overwhelmed. David Davies gave me a solemn nod and followed her out. Ben guided me toward the door. We had to pass Cassie's table. As we drew level, she lifted her head. Her makeup was smudged, her eyes red-rimmed and hollow. The look she gave me was not one of pleading or apology. It was one of sheer, uncomprehending devastation, as if I had become a stranger who had orchestrated her ruin from a great distance. We held each other's gaze for a second, a final wordless exchange across the chasm her actions had carved. There was nothing left to say. I turned and walked out. In the corridor, the harsh fluorescent lights felt different. The air was the same, but the weight I had carried for weeks was gone. In its place was a clean, cold emptiness. "It's done," Ben said, not as a question. "It's done," I confirmed. "What happens now, procedurally?" The court will issue a formal order recognizing the October 17th will. The forgery is legally void. The probate process is moot while you're alive, of course, but the document is secure. As for the other matter, the judge's comment about criminal conduct, that is now in the hands of the district attorney's office. They may choose to investigate, or they may not. It is out of our control. I nodded. I had not wanted criminal charges, not truly. The public legal humiliation was the consequence I had engineered. Prison was a different calculus, one I was not sure I wished to pursue. The pen was simple enough. Let us go home, Ben. He drove me back to my house. We did not speak much. The silence was comfortable, filled with the understanding of a task completed. He walked me to my front door. "Would you like me to come in?" he asked. "No, thank you. I need to be alone for a while." He studied my face, looking for signs of fracture. He saw none. "All right, call me if you need anything at all." "I will." I unlocked the door and stepped inside. The familiar stillness of my home welcomed me. It was mine again, truly mine, its future secured for purposes I believed in. I went to the study. The desk was just as I had left it. The blue stationery box was in its drawer. The pen set sat in its leather holder. I picked up the pen, the weight of it cool in my hand. I thought of Cassie's fingers holding it, practicing the curves of my name. I placed it back in the holder. It would be packaged and delivered to her eventually, as the will instructed. A final, tangible message. In the days that followed, a settled quiet descended. The house did not feel empty. It felt resolved. I resumed my routines with a new clarity. I worked in the garden. I read. I had lunch with Miriam to discuss the garden's expansion plans, now a future certainty. I met with the Scholarship Fund Committee. There was work to be done, a legacy to steward. I heard nothing from Cassie. Her lawyer, Armitage, sent a formal letter withdrawing all claims, a document Ben filed with the court. I did not know if she remained in the city. I did not seek the information. The tie was severed. The mourning for the daughter I had loved was a private, ongoing process, but it was separate from the woman who had betrayed me. I had learned to hold the two as distinct truths. A month after the hearing, Ben came over for tea. We sat in the living room, the afternoon sun warming the rug. "The order is final," he said. "Everything is locked tight. The video affidavit is part of the permanent record. There will be no challenges." "Good." He sipped his tea. "And you? How are you, really?" I considered the question. I am at peace. The justice was measured. It was exact. It has allowed me to reclaim my own narrative. That is enough. I have my home, my friends, my causes. It is a different future than I envisioned, but it is a good one. Ben smiled, a genuine, relieved expression. "You are a remarkable woman, Eleanor Vance." "I am a practical woman," I corrected, but I returned his smile. After he left, I walked out into the backyard. The rose bushes were preparing for their winter dormancy. The air was crisp. I looked at the house, its warm bricks holding decades of love and labor, of joy and now, of profound pain and resolution. It would not be sold to fund a condominium or a lavish lifestyle. It would become a resource for a community garden and educational opportunities for young women. Its value would be transformed, not liquidated. My legacy would not be a line in a bank account for a single heir. It would be a series of small, growing things, plants in a garden, minds in a classroom. It was a better legacy, a truer one. The revenge was complete, but it was not the end of the story. It was the difficult, painful pruning that allowed for new growth. I turned my face to the sun, feeling its weak autumn warmth. The past was settled. The future was mine to shape, deliberately and with intention. I went inside to make a fresh pot of tea, to write a letter to the scholarship board, to live the life I had fought so hard to protect. The silence in the house was no longer waiting. It was simply peace.